So by the year 2030, over 1 billion people will need to be reskilled.
A billion people.
Yeah, a billion. Just sit with that number for a second. That is roughly 1 in every 8 people on planet Earth.
It's a staggering metric to wrap your head around.
It really is. We are not talking about, a minor adjustment to the labor market here. We are talking about a fundamental restructuring of what it means to be a professional today.
Absolutely.
Because automation is just sweeping across industries at this breathtaking pace. It's rapidly replacing these routine tasks that we used to think were the absolute bedrock of a stable career.
Spot on. The completely safe jobs.
Right. We're talking about data entry, basic customer service, simple accounting, assembly line work.
Even mid-level analytical tasks now.
Yeah, the kinds of jobs that machines, robots, and artificial intelligence are just executing faster, cheaper, and with significantly fewer errors than humans ever could. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We have an incredibly urgent vision today. We are unpacking the top 10 skills that will matter most in 2030. We're moving past the corporate buzzwords, to dissect what it actually takes to future-proof your career, your mind, and your life.
And that statistic, that 1 billion people, it's a sobering reality to open with. It undeniably sets the stakes for our entire conversation. But before you, the listener, feel totally overwhelmed by the sheer scale of that disruption.
Which is easy to do.
Very easy. Before you start worrying about algorithms taking your job, we need to highlight a massive foundational advantage that you already possess.
Oh, this is crucial.
Right. If you were tuning into this deep dive as someone who is actively improving your English, you are already operating with a tremendous head start on the rest of the workforce.
100%.
Because English remains the undisputed operating system of the global economy. It is the language of international business, diplomacy, scientific research, and technological development.
It connects everything.
It does. By simply engaging with this complex material in English, you're actively wiring your brain for a connected international future. You're already in the arena, putting in the work.
I think that's a vital reframing. It shifts the perspective from anxiety to agency. You actually have control here.
You absolutely do.
And to ensure we are all building from the same foundation today, let's just examine some of the core vocabulary we are going to be leveraging throughout this deep dive.
Yeah.
Let's look at the nuances rather than just the dictionary definitions.
Good idea.
Starting with that intimidating concept from our opening statistic, being reskilled. In a 2030 context, what does the architecture of reskilling actually look like?
Well, reskilled is arguably the defining verb of this decade. Historically, it might have meant maybe taking a weekend seminar to learn a new software program.
Like learning Excel in the 90s.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah.
But today, it implies a profound professional metamorphosis. It is the acknowledgement that your original hard-won skill set might be facing obsolescence. You have to learn a completely new paradigm of abilities.
So it's not just an update, it's a rewrite.
That's a great way to phrase it. Consider a traditional supply chain manager. They spent 20 years mastering manual logistics and relationship-based vendor management.
Lots of phone calls and handshakes.
Yes. But when their company integrates a fully autonomous, predictive AI supply chain, that manager isn't just learning a new app. They must be reskilled to become an AI auditor, or a strategic forecaster, or even a systems ethicist.
They're transitioning from manual oversight to algorithmic governance.
That is undeniably the shift.
That makes the concept much more tangible. It is not about throwing away past experience, it is about porting it into a new framework. And this necessity arises because the world of work is shifting.
The ground is moving.
Yeah, we hear the word shifting thrown around constantly in economic forecasts. But in this context, it isn't a gradual pivot. It implies a tectonic movement beneath our feet. A shift changes the underlying landscape entirely.
That is a highly accurate way to view it. The global economy is shifting in ways that fundamentally alter value creation. And the primary engine behind that tectonic shift is automation.
Which is a word we hear every single day now.
Daily. Automation is a noun we encounter constantly, but we really need to grasp its current trajectory. It is the use of machines, algorithms, or artificial intelligence to execute work that previously required human cognition or physical labor.
Right. It completely transformed the manufacturing industry in the late 20th century.
But now it is shifting aggressively into white-collar, knowledge-based work. However, this reveals a fascinating silver lining.
Okay, I love a silver lining. What is it?
While automation is unparalleled at executing routine, rules-based tasks, it is spectacularly incompetent at tasks requiring human nuance, contextual empathy, and what we might call diplomacy.
Diplomacy. That is a fascinating word to bring into a business context.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because traditionally we reserve diplomacy for international politics, right? The high-stakes negotiation between nation-states to prevent conflict.
But when you look at the workplace of 2030, diplomacy evolves into a critical daily requirement. It becomes the art of navigating highly complex, matrixed human relationships across different cultures.
Negotiating resources without having formal authority.
Yes, finding alignment among competing interests. No large language model can walk into a tense boardroom and utilize human diplomacy to de-escalate a conflict.
It can't read the unspoken tension in the room. It can't understand the political capital at stake for the individuals involved.
It's completely blind to that.
And that leads us perfectly into the first major category of our deep dive today, the cognitive edge. Because if machines are taking over the execution of tasks, human value shifts entirely to how we think and how we create.
Which brings us to our first core skill.
Right. The first critical skill on our roster is critical thinking and problem solving. Now, this is where I want to push back a little on the common narrative.
Go for it.
Everyone lists critical thinking on their resume. It has become almost meaningless corporate jargon at this point.
It really has. Just filler text on a LinkedIn profile.
But in practice, I view true critical thinking as the ultimate defense mechanism against taking things at face value. Taking something at face value means accepting a premise exactly as it is presented to you without looking for hidden motives or structural flaws.
You just accept the surface level.
Right. And critical thinking is the active refusal to do that. It is the rigorous interrogation of information, the questioning of underlying assumptions, and the pursuit of root causes. How does this elevate beyond just being cynical, though?
That is a crucial distinction to make. Cynicism is passive. It is a blanket rejection of everything, assuming everyone is lying.
It's intellectually lazy.
Absolutely lazy. Critical thinking, on the other hand, is highly active and methodical. To analyze in this context doesn't just mean looking at a spreadsheet. It means systematically dismantling an argument or a data set to understand its structural integrity.
You mentioned assumptions earlier.
Yes, assumptions are the invisible load-bearing walls in any business strategy. They are the things we accept as true without empirical proof.
And in a digital ecosystem that is practically overflowing with synthetic media, AI hallucinations, and sophisticated misinformation, this skill is non-negotiable.
Misinformation being false or inaccurate data spread regardless of intent.
It can cripple an organization overnight if leaders lack the cognitive immune system to detect it.
Let's ground this in a high-stakes scenario. Imagine you are a senior director, and we will call this situation the marketing drop.
Okay, set the scene.
It is Monday morning. You open your predictive analytics dashboard, and the AI flashes a stark warning. Top-line revenue projections have dropped by 20% over the weekend.
Ouch. A normal manager who takes this at face value goes into immediate crisis mode.
They panic. They might slash the advertising budget, fire the vendor, or radically alter the pricing strategy just out of sheer terror.
Which is how cognitive biases hijack our decision-making.
Exactly. Undeniably so. A true critical thinker pauses that emotional reaction. They begin an excavation for the root cause.
The fundamental underlying catalyst for a problem. The disease rather than the symptom.
Right. They begin a rigorous questioning framework. They ask, is this drop a seasonal anomaly we failed to account for? Did a primary competitor launch a disruptive counter-campaign?
Or is there a data pipeline glitch causing the AI to hallucinate this drop?
Yes. They do not react to the output. They interrogate the inputs.
It is about maintaining cognitive sovereignty. Let's look at a more personal scenario that you, the listener, might face. We'll call this the miracle diet.
Oh, we've all seen these.
Right. You are scrolling through a news aggregator and you encounter a highly polished article claiming a newly discovered biohack cures all metabolic diseases within a week.
Too good to be true.
Always. The critical thinker does not succumb to the confirmation bias of wanting a quick fix. They run a mental stress test. They examine the domain authority. They look for peer-reviewed, double-blind studies rather than anecdotal testimonials.
They question the financial motive. Is the author of the piece, coincidentally, the sole distributor of the supplement?
Always check who is getting paid. They triangulate the claims across independent, reputable medical journals.
You are describing the construction of a mental firewall. And once you have the ability to deconstruct information through critical thinking, you must possess the ability to construct new value.
Which brings us to skill number 2, creativity and innovation.
Now, there is a pervasive tendency to use these terms interchangeably, but they represent entirely different phases of the cognitive process.
I see creativity as the divergent phase. It is the original spark, the generation of novel, unconventional ideas.
And innovation.
Innovation is the convergent phase. It is the grueling, methodical execution of turning that creative spark into something tangible, scalable, and useful, whether that is a product, a service model, or a workflow.
That framework is highly effective. If we look at the current landscape of generative AI, we see machines that are incredibly adept at pattern recognition and synthesis.
And AI can generate a passable white paper, sure.
Or render a stunning architectural image, or code a functional app based on vast libraries of historical data. But it is fundamentally interpolating within existing boundaries.
It's just remixing what already exists.
Spot on. It lacks the capacity to generate concepts that are genuinely groundbreaking or revolutionary.
Those adjectives carry significant weight. Groundbreaking implies a departure from all precedent. You are literally breaking new ground where no foundation existed.
And revolutionary suggests an overthrow of the existing paradigm. It entirely redefines a market or a human behavior, much like the transition from analog cell phones to the iPhone.
To reach that level, you must think outside the box. Which is a cliche, but it means abandoning the artificial constraints and historical orthodoxies that govern a specific industry.
Let's illustrate this with the struggling restaurant scenario.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine a legacy, family-owned restaurant facing an existential threat because a highly optimized, well-funded corporate chain has opened right across the street.
The non-creative, orthodox reaction is to engage in a price war. They lower prices,
Which reduces margins,
which lowers quality.
leading to a death spiral.
Because the giant chain will always win a battle of attrition based on economies of scale. So the creative intervention requires changing the fundamental nature of the competition.
They stop competing on the commodity of calories and innovate on the metric of experience.
Right. Perhaps they pivot to a farm-to-table cooperative model, deeply integrating with local agriculture to offer hyper-seasonal tasting menus.
Or they transform the dining room into an interactive culinary classroom. They take the foundational elements of hospitality and innovatively assemble them into a community event.
That is where human creativity outmaneuvers scale. Every time.
We see this exact composability in the Airbnb model. The founders did not invent the concept of a house,
Nor did they invent the concept of a vacation.
but they innovatively combined the latent, underutilized asset of spare bedrooms with the emerging ubiquity of mobile broadband and a revolutionary peer-reviewed digital trust mechanism.
They took pre-existing disparate components and synthesized them into a multi-billion-dollar paradigm shift.
And for you, the listener, navigating the complex journey of language acquisition, this applies directly to your methodology.
How so?
Well, rote memorization of vocabulary lists is non-creative and highly inefficient. But if you innovatively apply those words by writing a bizarre, emotionally resonant narrative, or by teaching the concepts to a peer, you are using creativity to hack your own neuroplasticity.
The learning becomes indelible. It sticks.
That concept of teaching and interacting with others serves as a seamless bridge into our next major category.
Body section 3, the interpersonal advantage. This domain focuses entirely on the architecture of human connection. We begin with skill number 3, communication and collaboration.
Let's dissect this. Communication isn't merely the transmission of data.
No, it's the ensurement of mutual understanding. It encompasses your syntax, your cadence, your utilization of silence, and profoundly, your nonverbal cues.
And collaboration is the operationalization of that communication. It is the ability to integrate diverse perspectives, manage interpersonal friction, and drive a collective towards a shared objective.
Why does this escalate to a top-tier skill by 2030, though? Hasn't teamwork always been important?
It has. But the geographic boundaries of the firm have evaporated. The future of knowledge work is deeply asynchronous, highly distributed, and globally interconnected. You will routinely find yourself on project teams spanning multiple continents, time zones, and linguistic backgrounds.
Let's examine the mechanics of collaboration. It demands the capacity to listen empathetically. Empathetically is an adverb that transcends active listening.
It requires you to cognitively and emotionally model the other person's perspective. You are not waiting for a pause so you can deliver your counter-argument. You are diagnosing their underlying concerns.
And you are doing this within a highly diverse ecosystem. Diverse meaning characterized by profound variety, not just in race or gender, but in cognitive frameworks, cultural conditioning, and professional backgrounds.
Consider the global video call scenario. You are leading a sprint review on a video conference. Your team comprises a lead developer in Tokyo, a marketing director in São Paulo, and a logistics manager in Munich.
If you default to a monolithic communication style, you will inadvertently alienate 2/3 of your team.
This is where understanding communication spectrums becomes vital. Based on high context versus low context cultural frameworks, your Japanese colleague might employ a highly nuanced indirect communication style, where preserving group harmony and reading between the lines is paramount.
While your Brazilian colleague might prioritize relationship building, expressive enthusiasm, and overlapping dialogue as a sign of true engagement.
Meanwhile, your German colleague likely values extreme precision, direct feedback, and rigorous structural adherence.
So a master communicator in 2030 acts as an interpersonal API. They read the digital room and dynamically recalibrate their delivery to ensure psychological safety and clarity for everyone present.
It applies just as heavily to asynchronous written communication. Think about the confusing email.
A classic problem.
A senior stakeholder sends a message requesting a massive competitive analysis, but the parameters and the deadline are cloaked in ambiguity.
An amateur communicator might make an assumption, spend 3 days building the wrong deck, or complain to a peer about the lack of direction.
The professional handles the ambiguity proactively. They reply with a structured, empathetic clarification. To ensure I am aligning perfectly with your strategic vision, could you confirm if you need a high-level executive summary by Wednesday or the comprehensive data model by Friday?
They neutralize the ambiguity without challenging the stakeholder's authority, preventing massive operational waste.
And that precise scenario is deeply intertwined with skill number 8, which we must discuss here: cultural intelligence, or CQ, alongside global awareness.
If emotional intelligence is how you navigate the human mind, cultural intelligence is how you navigate the global village.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
CQ is the specific capability to function effectively, respectfully, and persuasively in culturally diverse environments. We exist in an intrinsically interconnected global market. Supply chains, financial systems, and talent pools are completely interwoven.
A disruption in one hemisphere instantly ripples to the other. Because of that interconnectedness, the ability to bridge cultural gaps is a critical business function.
To bridge a cultural gap means to actively identify, respect, and navigate the divergent norms and values that naturally create friction when disparate cultures interact.
It requires suspending your own cultural default settings. Let's look at the high-stakes South Korean business deal.
Okay.
You are pitching a highly complex software integration to a large conglomerate in Seoul. In many Western, particularly American, corporate cultures, maintaining intense, unbroken eye contact during a pitch is culturally coded as a projection of confidence, transparency, and authority.
You look them in the eye to show you mean business.
Right. However, in traditional South Korean hierarchical structures, a junior vendor directing unwavering eye contact at a senior executive can be deeply jarring. It might be interpreted as an aggressive challenge to their authority or a profound lack of respect.
So a negotiator lacking CQ operates blindly, projecting their own cultural norms, and might lose a massive contract simply because their nonverbal communication was broadcasting hostility in the local context.
A professional with high CQ conducts cultural due diligence. They modulate their posture, their pacing, and their visual engagement. They trade in the currency of respect dictated by the host culture.
And listener, you are organically developing this capability right now. When you consume international media, read global news, or collaborate with language partners from other continents, you are building your cognitive flexibility.
You are learning that your worldview is simply one operating system among many.
This naturally propels us into the fourth major category, navigating the digital world. As we bridge physical and cultural distances, the medium we use is entirely technological. This brings us to skill number 4. Digital literacy and technological fluency.
We need to separate literacy from fluency here.
Okay, let's break that down.
Digital literacy is the baseline. It's knowing how to operate the software, manage your digital footprint, and verify information. But technological fluency is a much higher state.
It is an intuitive, almost native understanding of how digital ecosystems interact. It is the confidence to encounter a completely novel piece of software and intuitively grasp its logic, architecture, and utility without needing a user manual.
The reality of 2030 is that you do not need to be a full-stack engineer to be highly valuable. But you must recognize that technology will be inextricably woven into every conceivable profession.
When we say woven into, we mean integrated at a molecular level, like the threads of a tapestry. You cannot extract the technology without unraveling the job itself.
Modern agricultural manager uses satellite imaging and IoT soil sensors. A modern HR director uses predictive behavioral analytics.
Along with this fluency comes the mandate to understand basic cybersecurity, the defensive architecture protecting organizational data from sophisticated AI-driven threats.
Even more critically, professionals must navigate the ethical implications of these tools.
That phrase refers to the moral and societal consequences of deploying technology. If an AI algorithm can automatically screen resumes, should it? Who audits the algorithm for historical bias?
These are not questions for the IT department. They are questions for leadership. Let's visualize this with the small business tech stack scenario.
All right.
You join an agile 10-person startup. Within the first hour, the founder introduces you to a tech stack comprising a generative AI copywriting tool, a decentralized project management blockchain, and a real-time data visualization dashboard.
The obsolete reaction is to claim, I'm not a tech person, and wait for someone to train you.
The required reaction is to embrace it. To embrace means to adopt something eagerly and comprehensively. You dive into the interface, you map the data flows.
And crucially, you develop the capacity to troubleshoot. Troubleshooting is the analytical process of isolating the source of a systemic failure and resolving it.
When the API between the CRM and the marketing tool fractures, you don't parallelize the workflow by waiting for tech support. You logically isolate the variable and patch the connection.
Which requires an intimate relationship with data. Bringing us to skill number 7, data literacy.
Data literacy is the ability to read, comprehend, construct, and communicate narratives using data.
We are generating quintillions of bytes of data daily. Every digital interaction leaves a biometric or behavioral fingerprint. If you cannot read the data, you are essentially illiterate in the modern economy.
You must possess the analytical rigor to interpret this constant stream of information. To interpret means to extract actionable meaning from raw noise.
And a massive component of interpretation is defensive recognizing when data is being misrepresented.
Misrepresentation occurs when statistics are manipulated, cherry-picked, or stripped of context to engineer a false conclusion.
Let's look at a classic corporate trap, the 50% web traffic spike. The marketing department throws a celebration because top-line website traffic increased by 50% week over week.
A professional lacking data literacy views this isolated metric as a definitive victory.
But a data-literate professional looks at the dashboard and immediately applies pressure to the claim. They ask, what is the source of this traffic? Are these high-intent buyers, or did a bot farm scrape our site?
What is the bounce rate? Has this traffic resulted in a proportional increase in qualified leads or revenue? Or are we simply paying higher server costs to host irrelevant clicks?
They recognize the difference between a vanity metric and an actionable metric. We see this constantly in the public sphere as well in what we can call the political claim.
A public official states, since I took office, violent crime has dropped by an astonishing 30%.
The data-literate citizen demands context, dropped by 30% compared to what baseline? The anomalous peak of a pandemic year. Did the jurisdiction redefine the categorization of violent crime to artificially deflate the numbers? Is this a localized drop or part of a decade-long national macro trend?
The data literacy is the ultimate shield against manipulation, whether in the boardroom or the ballot box.
That analytical resilience translates beautifully into our 5th category, which delves into the psychological requirements of the future. Inner resilience and the growth mindset. Let's dissect skill number 5, adaptability and resilience.
These two concepts operate in tandem, but they describe different psychological mechanisms.
Adaptability is your malleability. It is your capacity to modify your behavior, strategy, and expectations in real time when the environment changes.
Resilience is your structural integrity. It is the capacity to absorb a massive shock, process the trauma or failure, and return to a baseline of high performance. It is how you recover from setbacks, unforeseen obstacles, or regressions that threaten to derail your progress.
The macroeconomic reality of the coming decade is that conditions will fluctuate with unprecedented violence. To fluctuate means to shift back and forth unpredictably.
Supply chains will fracture. New generative models will render entire service lines obsolete overnight, and regulatory frameworks will shift.
If your professional identity is rigidly attached to one specific way of executing a task, you will break. But if you cultivate adaptability and resilience, you don't merely survive these shocks. You thrive.
To thrive means to flourish, to find asymmetric opportunities hidden within the chaos and leverage them for exponential growth.
Consider the AI graphic designer scenario. Imagine a highly skilled commercial illustrator who spent 15 years mastering digital rendering. Suddenly, a multimodal AI drops that can generate hyper-realistic, perfectly lit commercial art in seconds based on a single text prompt.
The rigid designer views this as an apocalyptic event. They experience a profound identity crisis, fight the technology, and ultimately face irrelevance.
But the adaptable designer executes a strategic pivot. To pivot means to fundamentally change your strategic direction while keeping one foot firmly planted in your core competency.
They don't abandon design, they evolve their relationship to it. They use the AI as a powerful generative engine to create 50 rapid prototypes for a client in an hour.
They shift their value proposition from the manual labor of rendering to the high-level cognitive tasks of art direction, brand strategy, and managing the emotional psychology of the human client elements the AI is entirely blind to.
They become a curator of synthetic media rather than a competitor to it.
And think about the resilience required in your own journey to master the English language. You will face inevitable plateaus. You will spend weeks mastering a complex grammatical structure, only to freeze and forget it entirely during a high-stakes meeting with a native speaker.
The embarrassment is a setback. If you retreat into your comfort zone and abandon the language, you lack resilience.
But if you analyze the failure, forgive yourself, and schedule another conversation the very next day, you are actively forging the exact neurological resilience that will dictate your success in 2030.
Which feeds directly into the engine of adaptability. Skill number 9. Continuous learning, often referred to in organizational psychology as learnability.
Continuous learning is the paradigm shift from viewing education as a finite event, something you finish in your 20s, to viewing it as a permanent, ongoing state of existence. You must commit to being a lifelong learner.
This is driven by a terrifying but fascinating metric: the half-life of learned skills.
In physics, a half-life is the time required for a quantity to reduce to half of its initial value.
In the modern labor market, the half-life of a technical skill is collapsing. A highly specialized coding language or digital marketing strategy you mastered in 2022 might have a half-life of just 3 years. By 2025, half of its value has evaporated.
Let's look at the 2020 Facebook ads expert. Imagine an individual who built a lucrative agency because they understood the precise mechanics of the 2020 social media algorithms. They were at the top of their game.
But they grew complacent. They stopped reading. They assumed their knowledge was static.
Fast forward to today. Massive changes in data privacy laws, the deprecation of third-party cookies, and the rise of AI-driven automated ad buying have completely annihilated their previous playbook.
Because they failed to take initiative, the proactive, self-directed pursuit of new knowledge without external prompting, their expertise is functionally worthless.
To remain relevant, you must cultivate autodidactic habits. You must proactively read academic papers, test beta software, solicit ruthless feedback, and continuously update your mental models. The capacity to learn quickly and unlearn outdated methodologies is the ultimate meta skill.
And as we move into body section 6, as we move into our next conceptual territory, human centricity, we find the counterbalance to all this technological acceleration.
As machines absorb the technical and analytical workload, the premium on uniquely human emotional labor skyrockets. Let's delve into skill number 6, emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Emotional intelligence is an incredibly dense, multi-layered framework. It is the capacity to precisely identify, understand, and regulate your own emotional state while simultaneously accurately reading, empathizing with, and ethically influencing the emotional states of those around you.
Let's break down the classic 5-pillar model of EQ. Pillar 1 is self-awareness. This is the foundational metacognition. It is the real-time, conscious tracking of your internal state.
It is realizing, in the middle of a tense negotiation, that your heart rate is elevating and you are feeling defensive rather than just blindly acting out that defensiveness.
Pillar 2 is self-regulation. This is the executive control that prevents impulsive behavior. Impulsive means acting rapidly on raw emotion without cognitive filtering.
Self-regulation is feeling the intense frustration when a project fails, but choosing to respond with a measured analytical approach rather than sending an angry, destructive email.
Pillar 3 is intrinsic motivation, being driven by a deep internal alignment with the work itself, a desire for mastery and purpose, rather than being entirely dependent on external validation or financial incentives.
Pillar 4 is empathy, the profound ability to step outside your own ego and genuinely experience the emotional reality of another human being.
And finally, Pillar 5 comprises social skills, the behavioral manifestation of the first 4 pillars. It is the ability to build rapport, navigate office politics ethically, and de-escalate interpersonal conflict.
It is the ultimate human moat against automation. An AI can diagnose a complex medical condition with stunning accuracy, but an AI cannot sit on the edge of a hospital bed, look a terrified patient in the eyes, and guide them through the emotional trauma of that diagnosis.
Let's examine the struggling employee scenario in a corporate setting. You manage a brilliant analyst who has suddenly started missing deadlines and delivering sloppy reports.
A manager operating with low EQ reacts purely to the output. They act impulsively based on their own frustration. They pull the employee into a meeting and deploy a threat-based narrative.
Yeah.
Your output is unacceptable. If this isn't corrected by Friday, we are putting you on a performance improvement plan.
This destroys psychological safety, spikes the employee's cortisol levels, and guarantees suboptimal performance.
Conversely, a high EQ leader utilizes self-awareness to check their own frustration and deploys empathy to diagnose the root cause.
They initiate a dialogue. I wanted to check in. Your work is historically meticulous, but I've noticed a shift over the last 2 weeks. I'm not here to reprimand you. I want to understand what's happening. Is there an obstacle you're facing either here or outside of work that I can help remove?
This approach recognizes the human being behind the resource. It often uncovers systemic burnout, personal crises, or misaligned priorities, allowing for a sustainable intervention.
And that profound empathy is the prerequisite for skill number 10, leadership and social influence.
We need to aggressively decouple the concept of leadership from the concept of a job title. You do not need to be a vice president to be a leader.
Leadership is the behavioral act of inspiring, guiding, and elevating the people around you. Social influence is the capacity to shape the culture, decisions, and ethical standards of your environment without relying on coercive power.
This is critical because modern organizations are rapidly moving away from being rigidly hierarchical.
A hierarchical structure relies on a strict vertical chain of command where thinking happens at the top and execution happens at the bottom.
The speed of the modern market destroys hierarchical companies. To survive, organizations are becoming highly decentralized networks. They require leadership behaviors from individual contributors at every node of the network.
They need professionals who actively empower their peers. To empower is to distribute authority, to provide the resources, psychological safety, and autonomy for others to make decisions.
It cultivates a culture of ownership, a paradigm where individuals take complete, profound responsibility for the ultimate outcome of a project, rather than defensively claiming, "I just did my part."
Let's bring this to life with the falling behind team member. You are on a cross-functional task force. One of your peers is consistently failing to deliver their components, creating a bottleneck for the entire group.
You hold no formal authority over them. You cannot fire them or adjust their compensation.
The passive approach is to complain to the boss or silently harbor resentment while doing their work for them.
The leadership approach is to exercise social influence. You take them aside for a private, low-stakes conversation. You discover they're deeply intimidated by a new data visualization tool the team adopted.
Instead of exposing them, you empower them. You block out 30 minutes to sit with them and demystify the software. You help them secure a quick win. You influence the team dynamic from one of frustration to one of capacity building.
And for anyone listening right now, leadership can be exercised immediately in your language learning journey. When you participate in an online forum and offer a detailed, encouraging correction to a fellow learner, or when you organize a peer-to-peer speaking group, you are practicing the exact mechanics of social influence and empowerment that define a 2030 leader.
That is a phenomenal bridge into the highly specialized segment of our deep dive. We've spent an hour dissecting the psychological and strategic frameworks of the future. But to actually deploy these skills in the global theater, the vehicle you use is the English language.
If the vehicle is broken, the brilliant ideas never reach their destination.
That is undeniably the reality of global business. You can possess visionary strategic insight and profound emotional intelligence, but if your grammatical structure creates constant friction or ambiguity, your cognitive authority is severely undermined.
Therefore, we are going to conduct a rigorous analysis of 10 pervasive linguistic errors that professionals make when operating in English. We want to understand the why behind the mistake to eradicate it entirely.
Let's begin with a crucial conceptual distinction. Mistake number 1, the conflation of skill and ability. We hear these terms used interchangeably in boardrooms worldwide, but they represent fundamentally different concepts in English.
A skill is a learned capability. It is something you acquire through deliberate practice, friction, and time. Coding in Python is a skill. Executing a merger and acquisition is a skill. You were not born with it.
An ability, conversely, speaks to an innate capacity, a natural endowment, or a fundamental physical or mental potential. You might have the innate ability to recognize complex mathematical patterns, but building a predictive financial model is a skill you develop.
So, an ambitious professional shouldn't say in an interview, strategic planning is an ability I want to learn. You would say, strategic planning is a skill I am actively developing. Skills are forged. Abilities are endowed.
Exactly. Without a doubt. Mistake number 2 involves a structural collision between language families, specifically regarding the word technology and adjective placement. We frequently hear non-native speakers, particularly those from Romance language backgrounds, say something like, "We must invest in technologies new."
This happens because in languages like Spanish, French, or Italian, the adjective typically follows the noun it modifies. However, in English syntax, the adjective almost universally precedes the noun. It must be new technologies.
Furthermore, there is a nuance with countability. When discussing the broad, abstract concept of technological progress, technology is uncountable. Technology is reshaping society.
But when referring to specific tools, hardware, or software platforms, it becomes countable. We are deploying 3 new technologies. But regardless of countability, the modifier always comes first.
Moving to mistake number 3. We hit the perilous landscape of prepositions. When discussing our 5th skill, adaptability, a very common error is saying, our company needs to adapt with the changing market.
Logically, if you translate this directly from several other languages, it feels correct. It implies moving alongside the change in a state of harmony.
But English prepositions are highly specific regarding directionality and relationship. The required preposition is to. We adapt to changes. You adapt to a new paradigm. You adapt to a volatile economy.
The preposition to indicates a directional adjustment or a transformation toward a specific external condition. Saying adapt with sounds entirely unnatural to a native ear. Always adapt to.
Mistake number 4 is a classic pedagogical confusion. The difference between study and learn. They are inextricably linked, but they describe different phases of the educational pipeline.
Study is the input. It is the verb describing the action, the labor, the allocation of time, and the mechanical process of reviewing material. I will study the financial reports all weekend.
Learn, however, is the output. It is the successful neurological acquisition of the knowledge or skill. It is entirely possible to study relentlessly and fail to learn anything if the methodology is flawed or the focus is absent.
Therefore, you wouldn't say, I learned the document for 3 hours. You say, I studied the document for 3 hours and I learned how the supply chain broke down. Studying is the attempt. Learning is the achievement.
That distinction is vital for a growth mindset. Mistake number 5 involves a highly nuanced area of English that instantly separates intermediate speakers from highly advanced professionals. The distinction between will and going to when forecasting the future.
Both refer to future events, but they carry entirely different psychological and evidentiary weights. This deals with what linguists call epistemic modality.
We use will when we are making a prediction based on our internal belief system, a personal opinion, or a sudden spontaneous decision. If you sit in a meeting and say, I believe AI will eliminate the need for copywriters, you are stating a philosophical hypothesis.
However, we use going to when there is immediate, tangible, physical, or statistical evidence present in the current moment that points inevitably to a specific future outcome.
If you are looking at a chart showing a 90% adoption rate of a new software, you say, this automation is going to make our current workflow obsolete. Going to leverages evidence. Will leverages opinion.
Mistake number 6 is perhaps the most stubborn prepositional trap in the English language. Depend of. It is astonishingly common to hear brilliant professionals say, the success of the launch depends on the marketing budget.
This is a direct, literal translation from languages where the equivalent preposition translates to of.
In English, the verb depend is irrevocably bound to the preposition on. If we look at the Latin root, dependere, it means to hang from. You're physically resting the weight of one concept on top of another.
The success rests on the budget. It depends on the data. It depends on the client's feedback. Eradicate depend of from your vocabulary entirely.
Mistake number 7 highlights the tricky collocations. Words that naturally belong together, surrounding the noun decision. In English, we absolutely never do a decision. To say, we must do a decision today, sounds entirely ungrammatical and unprofessional.
We encounter a transatlantic divide here. In standard American English, which heavily dominates international tech and commerce, the strict collocation is make a decision. The board needs to make a decision by Q3.
Conversely, in British English, you will frequently encounter take a decision. Taking a decision implies evaluating a pre-existing set of options and selecting one, whereas making a decision implies synthesizing the option yourself.
Both make and take are perfectly acceptable and highly professional. Do is an immediate red flag.
Mistake number 8 is critical for operational discussions, the confusion between effective and efficient. These adjectives are both positive, and they sound similar, but they measure completely different axes of performance.
Effective is a binary measurement of outcome. Did you achieve the stated goal? If your goal is to cool down a room, and you leave the refrigerator door open all day, the room will get cooler. It was effective.
But efficient measures the elegance and resource management of the process. It means achieving that exact same goal with the absolute minimum expenditure of time, capital, and energy.
Leaving the refrigerator door open is catastrophically inefficient. Turning on a high-efficiency air conditioner is both effective and efficient.
In a corporate setting, a legacy software platform might still be effective. It eventually processes the payroll, but if it requires 3 days of manual data entry, it is hopelessly inefficient. Leaders must optimize for both.
Mistake number 9 involves the complex syntax of embedded questions. This trips up even highly proficient speakers. A learner might ask a colleague, what skills you think will matter most? They are maintaining the standard declarative word order while trying to ask a question.
When you embed an interrogative phrase like, do you think, or did they say, into the middle of the sentence, it fundamentally alters the required syntactic structure.
The embedded phrase becomes the operational core of the question, requiring the auxiliary verb do. The grammatically flawless phrasing is, what skills do you think will matter most? Failing to use the auxiliary verb disrupts the parsing rhythm for a native speaker.
Finally, mistake number 10, the chronic, exhausting overuse of the word very. The data is very bad. The new CEO is very smart. This strategy is very, very important.
Relying on very acts as a linguistic crutch. It dilutes the impact of your statements and makes your professional communication sound juvenile and repetitive.
To project authority and decluency, you must replace these weak combinations with absolute, powerful adjectives. Instead of saying a market shift is very important, articulate that it is crucial, essential, or vital.
Instead of describing a quarter's profits as very good, describe them as remarkable, outstanding, or unprecedented. Elevating your descriptive vocabulary instantly signals cognitive sophistication to your counterparts.
Those linguistic nuances are the polish that makes the armor shine. But knowing the theory of cognitive skills and the rules of English grammar is ultimately sterile if it isn't operationalized.
We need to transition into the practical application. How do we build the behavioral architecture to ensure we embody these traits by 2030? Let's outline a highly actionable daily compounding routine.
The architecture of change is built on micro-habits, not massive, unsustainable leaps. We need to integrate these 10 skills and linguistic precision into the margins of your existing day. Let's construct a comprehensive daily operating procedure.
We begin with the morning routine. Before you check your email, before the reactive chaos of the workday consumes your attention, carve out exactly 15 minutes of uninterrupted focus.
Step 1. Read a single high-quality English article focused on emerging technology, macroeconomic trends, or organizational psychology. It shouldn't take more than 7 minutes.
This simple act is a massive multi-tool. It forces digital literacy, it expands your global awareness, and by actively analyzing the author's thesis, you are engaging critical thinking.
Step 2 is moving from passive consumption to active production. Open a physical journal or a dedicated mental note Extract 3 unfamiliar vocabulary words or complex idioms from that article, and write 3 completely original, contextually relevant sentences using them.
This forces you to synthetically apply the language, bridging the gap between studying and learning.
Step 3. Define one hyper-specific learning objective for the next 12 hours. It could be as granular as, I will ensure I do not say depend of during my 2 p.m. sync. This intentionality primes your continuous learning engine.
Then we move into the operational phase, habits during the day. This is where you practice in the live fire of your professional environment. First, rigorously practice active, empathetic listening. This is the gymnasium for your emotional intelligence.
When a colleague is presenting, forcefully interrupt your internal monologue. Stop formulating your brilliant rebuttal while they are mid-sentence. Dedicate 100% of your cognitive bandwidth to understanding their underlying emotional and strategic position.
A second, incredibly powerful passive habit. Change the operating system language of your smartphone, your laptop, and your primary software applications entirely to English.
This is total immersion. It forces you to navigate complex digital environments, troubleshoot errors, and process information in your target language, perfectly fusing digital literacy with linguistic fluency.
Furthermore, you must consciously reframe friction. When a project timeline collapses or an API integration fails, monitor your internal reaction. Instead of defaulting to frustration, actively ask yourself, what is the structural lesson hidden in this failure?
That deliberate cognitive reframing is the exact mechanism that builds resilience.
Finally, we arrive at the evening routine. Another 15-minute blot to synthesize the day's data. Spend 5 minutes engaging in reflective journaling in English. Document the friction points.
What strategic error did I make today? When did I act impulsively rather than with self-regulation? How did I handle the ambiguity of that client request?
Writing this out in a secondary language forces a slower, more deliberate analysis, profoundly deepening your self-awareness.
Next, engage with high-density multimedia. Watch a 10-minute TED Talk, a Y Combinator lecture, or an advanced tutorial relevant to one of our 10 core skills. Keep your notebook open and actively capture the structural arguments being made. This satisfies your continuous learning mandate.
And to close the loop, inject yourself into a digital community. Leave a highly detailed, thoughtful comment on an industry forum, answer a technical question on a message board, or share a synthesis of the video you just watched on a professional networking site.
This exercises your written communication, collaboration, and social influence in a decentralized environment.
If a listener commits to this exact protocol, a 15-minute morning activation, mindful behavioral tracking during the workday, and a 15-minute evening synthesis, the compounding interest on that effort over the next 365 days will result in a radically upgraded professional operating system.
You will be unrecognizable to your current self.
And that profound evolution brings us to our ultimate conclusion. I have a massive underlying realization to reveal to you, the listener. We have spent this entire extensive deep dive theorizing about the abstract skills required to survive the future of work.
But the reality is, by simply committing your attention to this highly complex, nuanced, hour-long conversation in English, you haven't just been learning about the future.
You have actively executed 5 of the 10 critical skills we just outlined.
It is a perfect meta exercise. Let's audit what you just accomplished. Number 1. Continuous learning. You recognized a gap in your knowledge, you took the initiative, and you invested your finite time into cognitive expansion.
Number 2, adaptability. You are not waiting for 2030 to arrive and disrupt your life. You are proactively adjusting your mental models and vocabulary to thrive in an environment that is still forming.
Number 3, critical thinking. You haven't just passively absorbed our voices. You have been running our scenarios through your own contextual filters, evaluating the logic of our arguments, and identifying how these macroeconomic trends map onto your specific industry.
Number 4, digital literacy. You utilized modern digital infrastructure to seamlessly access, stream, and process high-level educational audio across the globe.
And finally, number 5, emotional resilience. Let's be brutally honest, processing a dense, highly analytical conversation packed with advanced corporate strategy, psychological frameworks, and complex grammatical dissections, all in a language you are actively working to master, is a massive cognitive load.
It induces mental fatigue. It is difficult. But you did not close the application. You maintained your focus. You demonstrated the exact psychological grit required to thrive in complexity.
That is an exceptional baseline to build from. As we conclude this deep dive, I want to plant one final disruptive paradigm shift in your mind. As we accelerate toward 2030, the fundamental currency of the economy is changing.
The future unconditionally belongs to learners, not knowers.
The individuals who will be displaced by automation are those who build their identity around the static knowledge they acquired in the past. The knowers who believe their education is finished. AI already knows more than they do.
The individuals who will achieve unprecedented success are the learners. Those who maintain relentless curiosity, who possess the humility to unlearn obsolete strategies, and who view their mind as an endlessly adaptable operating system.
The future belongs to learners, not knowers. That is the thesis of the decade.
And that leads to my final challenge for you today. Do not let this immense amount of information dissolve into passive entertainment. Knowledge requires friction to become permanent. I challenge you to identify exactly one skill out of the 10 we unpacked today.
Perhaps it is building your data literacy, refining your emotional intelligence, or mastering the art of the pivot through adaptability.
Design a hyper-specific 10-minute daily protocol dedicated solely to that one skill and launch it tomorrow morning. And critically, articulate this plan to a colleague or mentor to establish external accountability.
Because when you synthesize and teach the concepts you acquired today to another human being, you permanently encode them into your own architecture.
That is the ultimate hack for mastery. Thank you for dedicating your time and cognitive bandwidth to join us on this rigorous exploration of the future of work and the mechanics of the English language. Keep engaging with complex ideas, keep leaning into the friction of learning, and keep aggressively expanding your capabilities. I guarantee that your future self, navigating the complexities of 2030, will look back with profound gratitude for the architecture you began building today. Keep pushing the boundaries of what you are capable of, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.